Well, joining me in the studio now is political commentator John Kavulich. He's president of the US-Cuba Trade and Economic Council and is a senior research editor at Issue Insight. Really good to have you in the studio with us, John.
Thank you.
In that press conference that Donald Trump held after the extraordinary turn of events, he effectively put a number of Nicolas Maduro's allies on notice, namely the leaders of Colombia and Cuba. How worried should they be about a possible US intervention in their countries?
I think they need to be worried. It's just the definition of intervention is not going to be the same as in Venezuela. But presidents of Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Nicaragua certainly need to be worried, because what President Trump has done is taken the word intervention, where we most look at it and say it means physical intervention. But over his, thus far, almost 1 year in office, he's shown that intervention can also be tariffs, sanctions, visa implications. And so those governments need to be careful in terms of just how vocal they are against what President Trump has done. But they also know there's not really anything for them to lose internally, and all politics is domestic, but they still have to be careful not pushing too far, because President Trump keeps a list and he acts asymmetrically.
We have seen somewhat of a cautious response from leaders in the Western Hemisphere to the events in Venezuela. What's behind that rather muted response, do you think?
Fear. It's really simple, and that when you look at the responses thus far, Keir Starmer from the United Kingdom said, we had nothing to do with it, we always support international law. The European Union came out and said, we just hope that European Union citizens are safe. Everyone is being pretty cautious. Even the Russian government, Sergei Lavrov, said, you know, we're deeply concerned, or whatever. But they're all being cautious because they all have to deal with this guy for another 3 years and 1 month. They all have trade agreements that they're still negotiating. He's dealing with sanctions, dealing with tariffs, we have in Ankara, Turkey in May, June, we've got the NATO summit coming up. President Trump goes to China in April. You have the UN General Assembly in September. You have President Trump hosting the G20 at his golf course in Miami in November. There are a lot of opportunities where he's going to see these people and he's going to remember who was criticizing him. And I think right now the one that's probably most in peril would be Prime Minister / President Sanchez of Spain, who not only dissed President Trump in terms of spending the 5% on defense. He basically said, can't do it, my constituents, my taxpayers won't allow it. But he's also now criticized what's happened in Venezuela, and Spain and Venezuela have had a very close relationship.
We also know that Donald Trump says the US will now be running Venezuela, at least for the foreseeable future. He mentioned that a number of US companies would enter the country in order to help rebuild the oil infrastructure there. What does that look like in terms of a forward plan for Venezuela? How long do you think the US will be running Venezuela for?
You know, we talked about this. Isn't like, you know, running Venezuela, running a country isn't like a takeover of Turkish Airlines or taking over a company. This is a much different animal. And one of the discussions that hasn't come up yet is that the Maduro government, during the last, you know, almost 20 years from Chavez on, they have piled up a lot of debt, billions and billions of dollars. They've been using oil to repay debt, specifically to China. So when President Trump says we're going to grab the oil, we're going to have US companies doing the extraction, the upstream, the downstream, is President Trump in April going to say to President Xi in China, have a little bit of a problem. You signed deals with Maduro. He's now in our jail. Those deals are gone. So if he owes you $5, $10, $15, $20 billion, you got to negotiate with me. Now, President Xi is going to be well prepared for that conversation. But the same is Maduro or Venezuela owes money to Russia. They owe money to Turkey. They owe money to the European. They owe money to everybody. And President Trump, from his business history, has a habit, a nasty habit, of accepting people's work and then not paying them, or not paying them what they expect to get paid. So I think we're going to see a lot still unraveling. There are sanctions that have to be dropped and have to be massaged. What companies want to go in there? And then you've got the impact of all this, which is if Venezuela starts pumping a lot more oil, then you have two issues. One, global capacity and global use. Oil prices will then likely go down. Now that means Russia could get hurt. That could help in terms of Ukraine, but it also can hurt Saudi Arabia, which needs oil prices higher, and US producers, which are also generally higher priced producers. So there's, with President Trump, there's always the headline, there's always the title, and there's what comes next, and what comes next is going to be probably ugly.
Okay, John Kavulich, we'll have to leave it there. Great to really get your thoughts on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you.